how much AI is too much in customer engagement or customer service? There's three big enemies for customer service. One is waiting time, secondly is the unknown, and thirdly is potentially the runaround or friction when you're asking people to do too much. If customers know they have to wait a certain amount of time and you can meet that, that's okay. But ideally we want to try and use AI to minimise the waiting time, minimise the effort, and maximise customer satisfaction. So we don't want everything to be fully automated because that can end up providing customers with a bad experience. And that's the last thing you want to do, is over-automate things. So let's have a look at what some AI use cases that we've done that have really delivered some ROI, some really good ROI. So we've got three examples here where we've used AI to help retain customers in a health insurance situation, where we've helped customers have their customers. I probably should say clients are our clients that use our software and systems, and customers are their customers. That might make a bit more sense. So customers sign up for a bank. This is an employer type banking arrangement, so the pay goes into this bank, but the customer, the employee, doesn't use it. Anyway, so we had some account activations and engagement increases, and you can see the numbers. The numbers are pretty good. The percent ROI seems like it's a mistake and that the decimal place is in the wrong place, but it's not. And so an ROI starts with a really clearly defined outcome. And you've got to use the right technology, of course. That's not always easy to choose the right one and the right methodology. Whenever we're doing a pilot project, we use a control sample. Sorry, I hit the mic. Use a control sample. You do not want to just go blindly and implement an AI system in a proof of concept without the control sample in place to ensure that you are getting a real return on investment. So the customer goal, the experience, and the cost of service, all very important. Let's have a look at a use case here. So AI has 5 different acts. Let's just call it. AI can be used in 5 different ways. The predefined logic or deterministic AI. So basically something happens and the data says this should happen next. Where AI can actually support, it can be generative AI, so that's the situation where AI has been used to create something. AI use cases. So there's the predefined AI, and so that's where it's sometimes called deterministic. So what ends up happening is, based on a set of data, AI will look at that data and say, hey, this is what should be done. AI-assisted is where a person is still based in the loop. So previously, the rule-based engagement might be that you get an invoice come in, AI reads the invoice and says, hey, this is over $5,000, it needs to go to this approval process. An AI-assisted one, the invoice might come in, AI reads it and says, well, I better send this to this person to check to see what the next stage is. So that's where it's assisted. The AI decisioning, where it decides, it says, hey, it's over $5,000, but it's within budget and there's a PO there, let's do it. AI creates, and in that particular case, that's the generative AI situation, and the agentic AI is where it actually takes over and does everything. So in that particular case, the invoice comes in, it looks at it, it's all above board, it gets approved, it enters the invoice automatically into your ERP system, and then schedules the payment to be paid. Can then even email the supplier once the payment is made with the remittance. So the interesting thing is the higher risk. Bear that in mind. When you have agentic AI, you do incur higher risk, because if something goes wrong, imagine if it misreads the invoice or something like that, and you accidentally pay the wrong supplier. Ask me how I know how that could happen. Anyway, another story. So let's have a look at the predefined logic example. So in this particular case, we had a client who was a financial services client providing employee benefits, and the employees, when they were to leave the company, they could either leave the money in the fund or withdraw it. And they had, this customer had a quite complex portal solution, and it was a lot of friction for their customers. So the employees had to sign up on the portal, and there was two-factor authentication. It's just a lot of work. So it wasn't all that well done. The other thing is that when they were leaving, if they wanted to transfer the money to a different bank or fund, they needed to submit documents. And so the objective was, we want to reduce the cost. The cost of running the portal was high, the customer experience was low, and retaining the customers into that fund wasn't actually working all that well. And we use WhatsApp Business. WhatsApp Business with the Incuba platform in the background is what was used, and the uptake was really good. So WhatsApp Business has got a couple of really key security features in there. So you can see there's an employee ID number and a passport number that needed to be provided, and that is an end-to-end encryption. The other thing that WhatsApp Business can do is it can, between Incuba and WhatsApp Business, what we did in this particular case is that an SMS is sent to the mobile number of what's on record, and there's a way of determining that that mobile number hasn't been artificially spoofed. So I don't know the exact terms, but there was security that was well and truly signed off on. The workflow was not just WhatsApp. So it was WhatsApp, SMS, email, the whole gamut. It really ended up with a very easy to use solution for both the customer, which was the financial services institution, and the client. Sorry, I got it around the wrong way. The client, which was the financial services institution, and the customer as well, which was the employee in this particular case. So it was a really good win-win situation. We used direct API integration in that particular case. This was not a traditional data warehouse type solution where we could go through ETL. It had to be real time, because you couldn't imagine, a customer uploads something and then they get a message back the next day saying, "Hey, you didn't upload this," and they're waiting for the ETL process to run. That'd be a disaster. What was really important in this particular case is that we made it really easy for the customer. It was a very familiar and accessible platform, WhatsApp. And we just solved one key pain point. Didn't try to boil the ocean, didn't try to do too much. And it was really important to make it frictionless for the customer. The really important thing is that AI needs context. And where does it come from? Well, it comes from your existing systems. It comes from the data in the data warehouse, the data lake, the transactional data. I mean, that's really the foundation of that context. And without that, it can be a bit of a challenge. The interesting thing is what we often find working with some of the larger financial services businesses is who owns the customer data. Is it a transactional type back office ownership, or is it marketing data? And sometimes even it can get really challenging because of the privacy laws and also some of the security issues. So there is that kind of tug of war. The other thing is, how do we know if it's even correct? And that can be quite challenging as well. So AI-assisted engagement, this is where AI supports. And in this particular case, what we had was a client that was selling enterprise software. I'd like to meet them. They were selling enterprise software, and what they wanted to do, what they needed to do, is that they needed to do some research on their particular prospects. It was quite a time-consuming exercise, so they thought, let's just ask one of our AI bots, ChatGPT or Claude, can you go do some research? The problem is that what was coming back was sometimes fiction. It would make stuff up. So we created a workflow process. So in this case, we used N8N with a couple of different LLM AIs to go and determine, well, what's important for the salesperson to know, a series of questions that would be asked. Then it would go off and do some research, look at the website, look at any company reports, look at any job postings, whatever's required, then come back with the summary information, provide that to another LLM, I should say large language model, another model, provide it to another AI model, which would then verify that the information that came back was actually true and accurate. In other words, the first agent hadn't made stuff up. So it was really important to do that. And we were able to enrich the data for the salespeople and save them time. So here's an example of where we use AI to create interactions with clients. So in this particular case, the client sells cars online, and what they would do is they needed to sell more cars. Of course, that's what you do. The way that this worked is we would send email nudges or SMS nudges to people that had expressed some interest in a particular vehicle. And you'd often use a bit of psychology to determine, sorry, that's not working, a bit of psychology to determine what vehicle you'd want them to click on and put a request into the dealer. And so we basically had the what's called the archetype, the job to be done archetype. So what that is someone buying a sports car because they want something for the weekend, or are they buying a family mover, or just a small runabout to get to work? So that's one particular component. You need to determine that. What was interesting in this particular, we used actually N8N to do a lot of this work, and it starts off pretty simple, but when you start getting into it, it wasn't all that simple. It was coming back and making cars up, and I'm thinking, well, that's pretty handy if they did exist. Everyone wants to make up a car, but no, in this particular case, you can't really sell something that doesn't exist. So that's how it was. We had to actually go out and check that they exist. And so the end result was that, again, multiple agents, sometimes multiple agents, the leads were sent straight to the dealer. The writing in the email was also, again, you can use some good psychology to try and determine, if we go back, what's interesting is that one of the things we did there is that you'd pick a particular vehicle and you'd have what's called the dummy vehicle, the one that makes the vehicle you're trying to sell look really good. And so there's always those ones there. Sometimes it's newer with more Ks. And so do you go for an older car with less Ks or a newer car with more Ks? And it depends. The interesting thing, I think the psychology is sometimes people will buy, this amazed me, I always go for the older car with less Ks. But some of the dealers will tell me, no, it's the other way around. A lot of people want to be seen in the newer cars. So that was a particular example of that, of what we did in that case. So in summary, the AI made up cars. We had to balance not flooding the buyer with just too many emails, and we had to balance waiting and nudging. So what nudging is it's basically either sending an email or an SMS to the buyer, the potential buyer. Hey, why don't you have a look at this, or have you considered this other vehicle? So another AI use case is when AI actually acts, and this is the so-called agentic, and this can be a bit more, I suppose, beneficial but also risky. So in this particular case, we wanted to create an AI insurance policy agent that would basically answer questions. And so this is almost like, at this stage, we're in April 2026, this is kind of the gold standard. What you want customers to be really serviced without waiting and feel like they're talking to a human but actually getting the answers they want at a low cost. So rather than staffing your call centre with hundreds of people, you have these agents that are ready there to understand what's going on and deliver that service. And that can be done if you have the right infrastructure and the right data and the right systems and the whole methodology. And so in this particular case, we used, again, a platform designed for this, which uses both AI and textual context and brings in a lot of data from the client's existing systems. The other important thing was that the engagement needed to know when does this person need to speak to a human. So at a particular point in time, if the AI, the language model wasn't able to answer the question, you don't want to keep the person frustrated. I know I had to ask my wife to contact Bupa recently about something, and she kept saying, I got this bot, and I kept saying, speak to a human, but it wouldn't understand me. I don't know why. They should put that in there as a trigger word, human. As soon as they hear human, you want it to be escalated and say, okay, I know you want to speak to someone, we're not getting anywhere. That's the most frustrating thing you could ever imagine. And so we had to put that in there. And so we used, this is just really what basically we had to do. We had to get a whole bunch of records and organisational knowledge, and then knowledge of the product that's being solved. And also what's really valuable is when you're using the right system, you know that the person's asked the question before. You know that you understand the kind of person you're dealing with, and that becomes really valuable for the customer to call and not have to repeat themselves. So in summary, I've gone through a few use cases here. The engagement increase is good. The ROI is astounding. I think it's worth looking into.